Okay, kia ora and welcome to this Fireside Chat. Today I'm talking to Diana from Mission Ready HQ, which is going to be a fantastic conversation on education systems, future of education, pathways into the workforce. There's so much we want to cover, lots of cul-de-sacs. So welcome, Diana. Thanks for joining me today.
Kia ora, Vic. Thank you for having me. It's super exciting. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, this should be fun. It's pretty relaxed.
Yep.
People, we can't see the people, they can see us. But for everyone who is listening to this, you're welcome to ask questions as we go using the Q&A function. So just add your questions in there and I will get to them as Diana and I are chatting. But let's just kick into it, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to ask you is why don't you briefly tell us about your potted history so we can get to know you a little bit and what brought you to this chapter in your life?
Yeah, sure. Now, where do I start? So much to talk about. But okay, let's start from early childhood then. So while I look and sound and I'm very much Indian, I was actually born in a little country called Kuwait. It's a little country in the Gulf region. If you don't know where it is, it's a small dot on the map. But the reason I want to bring this up is because I often reflect on my upbringing, which I believe I had a lot more privilege that gave me a good footing to go on the journey I am on right now. But it's really not my story that's inspired me on this path. But I'll come to that in a little bit. My path, like most people, has been quite non-linear, I should say. But when I went into high school, I took computer science as one of my subjects, and I was actually pretty good at it. But I guess at that time or in that world, it was not normal for women to get into tech, and it wasn't seen as sexy or cool. And so kind of that lack of awareness and guidance saw me go towards something that I thought at that time was quite glamorous, which is the hospitality industry. And I must admit that the advisor, the career person came from one of the amazing hotels at the time, was really good at selling the industry to us. And boy, I'll tell you what, well, most of us did kind of go, oh, that would be such an amazing career to get into. So fast forward 3 years, I did a 3-year degree in hospitality, and I started my career as a management trainee. And guess what? 6 months later, I left. So that's how useful my degree was. But it really did open doors for me. So a lot of that experience and learning does help in many ways. And so I went on and gained experience in the utility sector, telecommunication sector. I changed roles from being in customer service to support roles to quality assurance, and that then led me to training. And my real light bulb moment came when I became a corporate trainer, and that really the transformation I could see in individuals as a result of them getting access to the right tools, the right knowledge at the right time, and what that did for a company. And if you can imagine a community, it was phenomenal, and after a few years having worked with some of the best corporates in India at the time, I decided that, hey, this has been great. It's been a great journey, but I really wanted to do something more meaningful, something more purpose-led. And so that's when my journey to New Zealand began. And that brought me here as an international student. For those of you who are migrants and who may have been quite naive walking into a completely new country, bright-eyed, optimistic, that's kind of who I was. So here I am starting my new journey, and I am quite optimistic I should find a job because I've got experience behind me. And I applied for a couple of jobs thinking, hey, I got this, what could go wrong? And within almost the first hour, I get my first rejection letter. That's how fast it is for international applicants.
Wow.
And a few more applications later, that becomes 100 more applications later. That's led to more rejections than I can count. And now I kind of believe I'm quite a resilient person. And this was tough. So I kind of reached a tipping point where you get rejected and you go, I'm done. I don't know how to crack this. And I had a friend who came and said, hey, why don't you go and talk to this employer who's just rejected you and say, find out what's happening. Maybe a person-to-person conversation might help. And funnily enough, having had that conversation with the employer, I walk out of there with an offer letter. And that valuable lesson still holds true to today, which is people trust people. So it's not what you see on paper, right? Like you can sound like you're overqualified, which was often what I got as a rejection. And when I walked out of there holding the piece of, that's the biggest joy I've experienced, And the next day I walk in, I've got my gadget of the day, Vic, and that was the vacuum cleaner at Sky City. And see, we all need a beginning. And yes, it was a role keeping the casino clean and so on. But it was a role. It was a beginning, and I'm so appreciative that somebody opened the door for me. And from there, one of the biggest lessons I've taken is that you must take initiative. You must put your hand up. You must get to know people. And that's led me to get into education. And from there, I spent a decade at one of New Zealand's largest Institute of Technology and Polytech. And my last role was that of GM of Partnerships and Alliances. But when I do reflect back, I think one of the reasons I was drawn towards education was really understanding the power of education. And that came from looking at my own family. So I started with, I knew that I came from a point of privilege. I had a lot of different privileges. And that realization came when I was talking to my dad. He is one of 8 children, was born in a relatively poorer background. And had it not been for his education, I wouldn't have experienced the kind of privilege I experienced in my lifetime. And that exposure, and even today, when I look back to my family, I know I have got cousins and nieces and nephews who haven't had that privilege. And they therefore are not exposed to the kind of opportunities I've been exposed to. And what a big difference that makes. And so when I started thinking about where's my purpose, what do I do in the next stage of my career, I could totally see the need for change, especially in light of the advancements happening in technology. How do we not leave anyone behind? And how do we plug the skills gap or the skills shortage at the time? And that's what led me towards what we have created now, which is Mission Ready.
Yeah, so that's one lovely segue to my next question, which is, this brings us to Mission Ready. So tell us about your kaupapa and your aspirations as an organisation.
Yeah, so Mission Ready is a tech career accelerator. We started 6 years ago, and our kaupapa has been about empowering people to unlock their potential in tech. We kind of started with one of the reasons why we started this. It's been co-founded by 2 of us, Alan, who's from the tech sector, and I've come from an education background who sees the power of tech. And together we could see some of the frustrations of both sides of the equation, if you like. So candidate or learners completing degree programs and not getting jobs. And on the other hand, employers looking for talent and not finding talent. You kind of go, where's this mismatch? And it came down to the fact that that our learners were not, maybe education was changing so rapidly for the tech sector, they weren't able to keep up with it. And so not coming out with the right skills, not coming out with the experience also put them behind, because employers really want to hire people who can hit the ground running, rightly or wrongly. And at the other end, you've got employers saying, we're hiring a junior talent, we need somebody with 2 years of experience, a big gap. And that really needed to change. And that's why we created what we call New Zealand's Tech Career Accelerator, which includes accelerated training that is accredited by NZQA, followed by what we call a mentored work placement with one of our 200 plus partners. And it's that combination of building technical skills with professional capabilities that employers need. That's the magic that we believe is what helps people transition into the workforce quickly. And we've had career changes from all sorts of backgrounds, which is quite exciting. And we've got a placement rate of 80% plus. So it kind of proves that you need to be able to fix both ends and bring the gap closer together.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Cutting to the chase, I advertise this webinar as a discussion on new approaches to education and pathways into the workforce. So my first question to you before we really dig into how Mission Ready is helping fill that gap, is the current higher education system, vocational and tertiary, meeting the needs of learners and employers, or do you think it's failing one or both sides of that equation?
I'm clearly biased here, and I'll probably start by saying, had it not been failing to some extent, we wouldn't need a Mission Ready. And in all fairness, I think that the system does meet some of the needs. It's just not fully meeting the needs of either side. Now, you think about the current higher education system in New Zealand, it's facing quite significant challenges in meeting the evolving needs of learners and employers. Now, I've been in that environment and I understand how traditional education and pathways do struggle to keep pace with the change and the approval process and how long some of those things can take. And yes, I can see a lot of momentum right now where there is adaptability happening, but often it's still resulting in kind of a mismatch between what students need and what employers actually need. And when I think about it, I kind of think, hey, we've got a system here that can be cutting edge, leading in the education space, but it still lacks that agility to adapt to what's happening. So if we kind of go back to the fact that there is still a gap that both sides are facing, this a strain on the system. Learners graduating without job-ready skills, employers facing talent shortages in some areas. And I want to give you an example. We call our learners candidates. So if you hear me referring to them as candidates, they're our learners. And we do that on purpose because we often tell them, when you come to Mission Ready, you're not coming here to become a student, you're coming here to become a professional. And therefore, we're going to treat you that way. And so everything we design, right from our missions or our projects through to the way we welcome them, it's all based on workplace practices. But what kind of feels like the stretch, and the example I wanted to share is we've had learners complete 3-year degree programs, Vic, and you kind of imagine after a computer science degree that you would know where you want to go and you've taken the right subjects. And it's heartbreaking when you see somebody has spent 3 years, not actually been advised to take the right coding paper, wants to become a software developer, no skills. That's and you know, so we're seeing that mismatch happen, and that's also, it's not just the program design necessarily, it's also coming down to the advice available to learners, it's the opportunities that they're exposed to. So there's a lot of things that are not, or that are failing in the process, that's resulting in us not giving our future tech talent the right step forward.
Yeah, massive. And I love the way that you're reframing it to that, you know, that even that language that you call your candidates, not learners, because they're there with you to prepare them for the workforce. And that's such a different approach, isn't it, than any other education that they may be enrolled in here in New Zealand right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. We often get asked, are you NZQA approved? Because we don't use any of the language on our website. So it doesn't come across as an academic institute. And we often tell our candidates, hey, if you want a piece of paper, we're not the place. If you want the skills to get where you want to get to in your career, come to us.
So massive question to ask you now, but if you held the policy pen, or if you could have a meeting with the two ministers of education right now, what would you change in the funding, the design, the programs of the education system? If you had that opportunity, what would you want to fix, I guess?
There's so much to be fixed. Okay, but I'm not well versed in this area of public policy or anything, but in my kind of small brain, humble experience, I really do believe that a strong public-private partnership between industry, government, and education is critical. And the advocacy that the Institute of Professionals, tech professionals like yourself, Vic, and NZ Tech and so on are doing is such an important role that is required and needs to continue for us to be at the forefront of this innovation. Now, if I had that magic pen or wand or whatever we call it, I would probably nail it down to maybe three things that I would focus on. One would be initiatives that break down barriers for marginalized, disadvantaged or groups that are facing financial hardship, and this could be in the form of scholarships, apprenticeships, or subsidies for companies to invest and attract the talent pool that's required to build a diverse, innovative company. The second thing would be introduce like a lifelong learning fund per New Zealander to keep us ahead and really not leave no one behind, because that's the future if I think about how we're going to be learning and so on. And the third one I would say is incentivize and subsidize reskilling, upskilling programs as this tech sector evolves. And it's not just for the sector, it's across the board because tech is impacting every industry, and really embedding continuous learning into policy and industry practice as well, and kind of building that real partnership between the three parts that need to work hand in hand. Real big fan of creating policies that are inclusive and that can create pathways to ensure New Zealand has the skilled workforce we need to thrive.
Thank you for that. And I love your three ideas and totally agree. The lack of focus on reskilling, upskilling, the lack of focus on lifelong learning, and the need for every role in every industry to embody digital technology for productivity advancements, and the way that they're having to be competitive on a global stage requires an investment in people's tech skills, don't they? So we're in a very different paradigm now.
Absolutely. And see, we can learn we're in a unique position to learn from other countries as to what worked and what didn't work, whether we look at Singapore or we look at Hong Kong.
Yeah.
We look at what Israel's done. It's just massive investment in the right place to build, an asset for our country and give our people a future. It seems like a no-brainer. So you and I probably agree, right?
Yeah, we probably do. So before I pivot us on to my next topic, which is talking about STEM education and the education system, there is one question on the message board from Sally Joe, and it's back to when you were talking at the beginning and you got that opportunity to speak to the hiring manager at Sky City. And she said, how did you get the appointment with the employer? And what did you say that caught their attention enough to talk to you about why your application was rejected? Because I guess that is a question that people would have if they want to follow up. How do they follow up with the employer that's rejected them?
That's a great question. I had to take a minute to think because it was so long ago, but it's come back to me. So what happened was I had a friend who was working there. And so I was looking around my network and I was talking to my friends and I said, hey, I got rejected from here. And so my friend actually put her hand up and said, I'm actually working there. I said, do you know this person? Could I get an intro? And she said, yes. And it's the first thing is find out who in your network may have a connection, and LinkedIn has made it so much easier for us to do that.
Yeah, true.
And often you'll find that people are warm to actually supporting you and helping you get an introduction. And that allowed me to get a meeting with this employer, this manager, and have a conversation.
Nice. I love it. Leverage networks. It's a really good point.
Mm.
Okay. And I'm sure there are other questions we could tackle around how do we establish networks, but we're not going to. We're going to move on to talking about STEM. So you and I in the past have often discussed the pipeline challenge, and it's very topical. And we know that there are falling numbers studying STEM subjects in schools and falling numbers of women entering into STEM occupations in higher education, which is just mind-blowing. And I know this is a space that you're really passionate about trying to solve. So talk to me about what you see needs to change, and in this kind of how do we get young people interested in technology?
How do they get interested in anything?
Well, that's true.
There is so much information out there, so much misinformation out there, and so we're battling quite a challenge in today's era in terms of getting the attention in the first place and getting the awareness out there as well. So I kind of would see that coming down to two or three things that I think is what we could aim to look at. One is the fact that we at school, even at primary school, it's how do we build that excitement around being curious. It's not, don't call it STEM. Don't call it something that puts a preconceived notion into a child's brain around it being something that I can't aspire to. But let's look at it from a different angle and say, if I were curious about solving this, how would I do that? And what kind of tools and resources and knowledge would I need to be able to do that? And it's actually interesting because my daughter's 5 years old, and I'm seeing that the schooling system is actually adapting the style of approaching or problem solving, which is actually quite amazing to see what a child can do with a scenario like that. And without her knowing that she's learning science or technology, she's actually building a skill set there, which is quite amazing. And then the next phase comes, which is how do we create awareness that this is actually a career or an opportunity that exists, and not fall into stereotyping what I need to be or what somebody else needs to be to fit in. So breaking down that barrier. And the third bit would be for me around whether it happens in reality or not is this notion that there is streaming still happening within schools where we may unfortunately be telling our kids that you are better suited to X career and therefore go into trades or fashion because you're a woman, or hospitality because it's easy, or science because you're quite intelligent and become a doctor, an engineer. And so this talk about tech, nobody's doing. It falls right through the cracks. And one of the big shifts, and this is a part that I'm quite passionate about, that we are seeing a decline in the number of high school students getting into tech. I think it's declining by 2% each year or so. And given where our industry is going and the nature of growth our industry is experiencing, we're not going to be able to sustain the talent gap here in New Zealand. And how long are we going to export talent for? And so one of the initiatives that Mission Ready set out to do is put power back into the hands of youth. And how do we do that? We actually created a free career advisory tool that specifically for tech, so no distraction from other stuff, where it's more about discover your strength, discover or figure out your superpowers is what I like to say. So figure out your superpowers and how that could be a career in tech. And so you're actually starting from a position of, hey, I'm so creative, I'm so good at, I've got all these amazing other attributes, and based on that, I could be a designer in tech of the next solution, or I could be a developer and so on. And so it's like removing that bias that we talked about earlier and putting the power back into their hands to say, here's why you could absolutely consider tech as a career. So that's one barrier broken. The second part to that is to say, okay, but do I really see myself there? So what kind of role models can we showcase? Do we have women who are in tech? Do we have people who look like me, who sound like me, and so on? And so it's introducing them to a network of professionals that they can visually see and know that that could be them. And then the third bit is it really me? So how do I know if I would be good at this career? And one of the initiatives that we've launched is what we call the Tech Career Launchpad. And essentially, while you're at school, what if you could experience what it's like to actually build a technology solution, wearing the different hats, like from designing a product to building it to analyzing it, all of those different facets, and then you've got your assessment, you've got this experience, and you can go, amazing. Now that I know all of this, I definitely want to be in tech. Or they might say, I don't want to be in tech, and that's absolutely fine, because we know, that's an informed decision, and it's not a biased decision.
Nice. And we've got a couple of questions on the message board that I think ties into that really nicely. One of them from someone who has asked, they're autistic and therefore need special considerations in the workplace. How do they navigate to find a role as an autistic person in tech? And I know there are others on this listening to this webinar right now that are neurodiverse and have found that technology is a great industry for them, but that getting into it seems to be the hurdle that people struggle to overcome. Do you have any thoughts or advice on that?
And so we do get candidates on varying ranges of skill. And the thing that we find useful is, one, being aware. So if you need a special support structure, if you need anything that you're aware of, because if you think about educators or employers, they may not really know how to support the differently abled talent that we have. And so, unfortunately, we do have a task to educate those in the field, and therefore provide that supportive and welcoming environment so that you can continue to thrive. So there's a bit of an education piece, not necessarily for those who are supporting or inviting those with different abled characteristics into the workforce, but it's also an opportunity to create a safe environment. So from my perspective, as long as you can be transparent and share with us the tools and the resources that can help us guide you better, the better all of us will get at supporting and welcoming.
Yeah. And I guess coming through a program like yours, you help bridge that, don't you? Like with that support, finding the right employers who have got the structure, who can support an autistic or neurodiverse person into their workplace. That's 100%. Really cool.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how can international students participate in Mission Ready? The question is, I know several internationals who are new computer science graduates, keen to stay in New Zealand but struggling to find a job. And so can Mission Ready be that kind of support to transition from having done that computer science training that you were talking about before to helping with the work ready skills? And does that apply for international students as well?
Yeah. I wish I could say yes to this one, but we are currently approved to deliver to domestic students only, which means that you must be a New Zealand resident or citizen to be able to access the programs we offer. We kind of started with this basis because if we can't support local talent in the first place, we won't be in a position to help all of our other amazing talent that's coming from overseas. And so maybe in the future, I'm not saying a no, but at the moment it is domestic focused.
Thanks for updating that. And then the last question from the message board before I go back to my question. How do you get your employer partners on board? How do you get them engaged?
That's the secret sauce.
Of course.
The reality is employers do value talent, and often it's very hard to find the right talent. And our job has been to make it simple and easy for partners to engage with our process. And we bring them on as what we call them as mission partners. So the barrier for employers engaging in many cases has been it either costs them too much money, too much time, too much effort. And we take a lot of that pain away from employers because we are first and foremost focused on enabling our candidates to succeed. And because we deliver what we call micro-credentials, the mentored work placement is a micro-credential. It is a learning opportunity. And therefore, the host organization as an employer, their responsibility is to provide a great environment and a project that we scope with them. We vet the project together. And that allows us to create that learning environment that they can apply that learning into. And we supply a mentor from our end, an industry mentor as well. So that's removing some more effort and time commitment from the partners and making it more simpler and easier to engage. So it kind of is creating a win-win-win outcome for everybody. And we do not charge employers any recruitment fees. Like we said, our first commitment is to enable more candidates to succeed, and we will remove any barrier that stops employers from doing that.
Nice. I'm going to ask you my last couple of questions. The first one's a little bit of a negative one, and then the second one will turn it around and be positive. So the first one, the country's doing it quite tough right now, resulting in less and less entry-level roles being created.
Yeah.
What are you seeing and hearing is happening in the market at the moment?
Yeah, it's definitely tough in some areas more than others. We do know that tech companies in particular are quite cautious while hiring, particularly for entry-level roles. And having said that, the demand for skilled candidates who can blend technical and human skills together is still pretty much on the rise. It's good to come into this side of the year because I can see that in the next 6 months that's going to start taking off again. Many companies are actually shifting more from like a permanent workforce base to short-term project-based roles, which allows them to bring in fresh talent without long-term commitment as well, especially to ride out this wave. And the trend kind of highlights how important it is for most of us looking for work that you have got not just the work-ready skills, but also the hands-on experience. So you can bridge that gap faster and become more valuable in delivering the outcomes for the solution that's being created. So if I think about in New Zealand, actually, I was also going to mention that there's a shift in where the jobs really are. So it's not just within the traditional tech type companies that we think of. Often you think about FMCG, foodstuffs. There's a lot of growth happening in adjacent sectors, and it's absolutely, and banks for that matter. It's really worth broadening your reach in terms of where you think a tech job is, which is nearly everywhere. I guess I was also going to say that to any tech who's present today at this webinar, there's actually no better time to be building or developing a grassroots talent pipeline. And I know that investing in talent that can deliver faster might seem like the easy win, but the reality is if you cultivate new local talent, it's quite cost effective to begin with. You build a very loyal workforce, and it ensures a real sustainable future in ensuring that you're committed to building a talent pipeline, that's great. You will be part of something bigger. And quite frankly, it's the right thing to do, so we should all do it. And I'm not saying this just to promote what we are doing, but it is by practice as well, Vic. So if you think about Ready, 40% of our team are actually graduates, because we truly believe that we can hire our candidates and they would be amazing, and they're still with us. So that just shows the power of building bringing in new perspective.
That's awesome. And then I want to finish on a really positive note. So we're recording this at the end of 2024. What are your aspirations and what are you looking forward to in 2025?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm very excited about 2025. There's the mission ready vision, and there's also the vision for what's coming up from a technological innovation perspective for the education sector. You've probably heard this quote from Nelson Mandela, which is, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And if you can imagine every child on earth, if they had access to a great education, we could unlock solutions to the world's biggest challenges and spark lasting change. So, and why am I bringing this up? Because I'm really excited about where AI is going in that context. Yes, there's lots of things to be fixed, but imagine having that one-on-one tutor that we've seen that kids who get access to that kind of privilege often take off in their lives and deliver kind of solutions that others who don't have access to that kind of thing would get left behind on. And so we're seeing that with AI, this is going to be quite a big game changer where we can really, really democratize learning. So really excited about that technological aspect that's coming up in the future. But at Mission Ready, I think we're super excited about going beyond on our impact initiatives. We have been a big advocate of helping career changes, and next year is going to be a year where we are looking at tech for all being our big change to our vision. Nice. And it's all about empowering the next generation of tech talent by becoming the tech skills partner for life, no matter what stage, age, or background you come from.
That's fantastic. And then last thing for anyone who's listening, how do they find out more? What's your website if they want to track you down?
You can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me for sure. We absolutely welcome connections. And if you want to find Mission Ready, it's just missionreadyhq.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Diana. That was an amazing conversation, starting from being born in Kuwait to your journey into education and your lived experience. I think is a really powerful part of that story. So thank you for sharing that experience you had and your aspirations for the education system. I think that was great. So appreciate your time, and we'll say ka kite to everyone.
Thank you, Vic. An absolute pleasure. Loved chatting with you too. But thank you everyone for joining us too.